Okay, so let's get started. We're going to be taking a look at working with our secondary fuel injection control within our Motec M1 programming. Now, our secondary fuel injection is also known as staged fuel injection. This is where if we have two different sets of fuel injectors within our fuel system to control the desired fuel flow into our engine. A primary set of injectors is what we typically run on at idle and part throttle, and then we'll bring in our secondary set of injectors that typically flow more or the same as our primary to bring in the additional fuel flow. This gives us the best of both worlds, where we can have a smaller primary set of injectors to give us good drivability and idle quality, but then when we get into higher power situations, so we get into, let's say, higher inlet manifold pressure ranges, that's going to allow us to bring an additional fuel flow to supply the horsepower that we need. This is really important on something like an ethanol or methanol car, where we're going to find a single set of injectors is likely to not give us enough fuel flow. So two sets of injectors will suffice, and we can control both sets of injectors independently. Now the Motec, because it's based on a volumetric efficiency style strategy, we tell the Motec what size injector we're controlling, and then it knows based on the desired fuel mass through the air and fuel model that we want to inject into the engine. It can then just take a look at both injector flows and figure out what pulse width each injector needs to run at if it knows what injectors it's controlling for both primary and secondary. It's actually really simple to configure and set up. So we're going to go through the secondary set of injector configuration here in this training module. So turning that on, assigning our outputs. We're going to go in and take a look at the control tables that are responsible for actually the staging between the primary and secondary set of injectors. Talk about some of that programming and setting that table up in a three-dimensional format. And then we're going to talk about some other additional things to consider with stage injection. So we have things like our charge cooling, fuel injection timing, and we have our fuel film that we actually have to go in and check and test when the secondary set of injectors are working and they're spraying fuel into the engine in order to properly model all of this within the Motec. So we have a perfect spot-on air and fuel model. So first things first, what we're going to do is jump in here and define what injectors we're working with for both primary and secondary within our Motec. That's pretty straightforward. We've talked about setting up our injector data and the importance of injector data, what it all means, in a previous training module. Let's jump in here and take a look under our drop-down menu. We're going to go to Setup, and then we're going to move here from our basic over to injector data. Within our window here, we can define what our primary set and secondary set of injectors represent in terms of the flow and the linearization data and any other control information that we need. Now, we can find right here under the injector data, we have our primary location after throttle. So that's normal for our primary set of injectors. My injectors are going to be located right above the intake port. So it's pretty typical for most port injecting engines. The calibration here is going to be specific to the injector that we're running. I have a set of ID 1050X injectors for my primary set of injectors. So I can simply go in here to the calibration and select those injectors in the drop-down menu. So let's go down here and let's grab ID 1050s, and we don't need to worry about any additional programming. So the reference flow and the linearization table data have all been characterized by Motec. So everything here has essentially been taken care of for us already. Now the next thing we're going to have to do is go to our secondary here. We have to specify the location of where the secondary set of injectors is located. In this case, mine are about 2-3 inches up higher on the intake runner than my primary set of injectors, and it's going to be found after the throttle plate. So the location here, I'll set it to after throttle plate. Now the calibration we need to make sure is correct, and this is going to be for ID 1700cc injectors. So that's what I have in my secondary set of injectors on my turbocharged 4-cylinder engine. Let's go here to calibration and let's select those in the drop-down menu, making this really easy. So we'll grab ID 1700s and we can find them right here. So now our secondary set of injectors and the programming details have been taken care of for us already. So that we know the reference flow, we know any of the linearization data that Motec has characterized for these injectors. Now there's a lot more setup and control that we have to do here, but one additional step that we want to take, because we're going to need to know what Motec's defining for the actual reference flow or the flow rate of the injector, because we're going to be using that in some calculations to specify to the Motec how to do the contribution percent, which is the staging between the primary and secondaries. It's very important, especially in my situation, because I have two different flow size injectors. So I have ID 1050s primaries, ID 1700 secondaries. So how we actually stage and bring those in terms of the fuel volume and the injector pulse width is important, because if we don't define the contribution percent, which is another table we're going to be looking at here in a few minutes, we'll find that when we're commanding the fuel flow into the engine, we're going to get to a point where if we don't have that contribution percent correct, we'll have one set of injectors hitting 100% duty cycle before the other. And we want them both to have equal amounts of fueling contribution relative to their flow size. So what we want to do here is be able to see what Motec is defining the reference flow at. We need to go and actually switch this back to manual. Now here's a little trick with the software. If you select an actual injector type here in your drop-down wizard menu and you go back to manual, you'll find that what you have left in terms of the values that are populated, they're actually displaying here, is going to be the injector you just selected. So it allows you to actually see the injector data and then potentially edit it if you need to. But typically we don't need to edit it because the work has been done for us from Motec. Let's go here to the secondary calibration and let's jump into manual. Now what we can find from this, taking a look at the data here, that the reference flow for the primary ID 1050s is almost 21.
Thanks for checking out our teaser clip. If you want to see the rest of this video and more than 500 hours of current EFI training we have to offer, make sure you click right here. If you want to go and check out more teaser clips from this training course, click here, and you don't want to miss any of the videos we're going to be releasing on this channel, so make sure you subscribe and click here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later.